because the Denver Broncos making the postseason and ending their playoff drought gives everybody in Denver hope. It's the Rockies Insider with your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons. Plenty to discuss this Tuesday evening with Brendan Rodgers seemingly at the center of all of it. We've got a future first ballot Hall of Famer coming to the NL West. And no, it's not the Los Angeles Dodgers. The A's are now spending money like crazy. Let's jump into it, talking about those Colorado Rockies, because they've got some stuff going on this offseason now that the Broncos have snapped their playoff drought. Rockies, of course, now have the longest postseason drought. They've missed out every season since 2018. So that's 6 in a row. Broncos snapping an 8-year drought. They, of course, won Super Bowl 50, that being their last time in the postseason. So they end that drought. And the real question I sort of have is, will the Rockies make the postseason before Denver's new NWSL team? So National Women's Soccer League, they just announced Denver is going to get one of the expansion franchises. That's going to start up in 2026. Their postseason gets started a little bit after when MLB has their postseason. So the Rockies have 2 years to possibly get in before the new Denver NWSL team. We don't have a name yet for that club, but I had to look it up. I was a little curious about what the NWSL postseason is like. This past year, 8 of the 14 teams in the league went to the postseason. Previously, it was 6 of the 12, but they expanded by 2 teams. And the 2024 expansion clubs, one got in, Bay FC, Utah Royals did not. In 2022, San Diego Wave got in their expansion year, and Angel City FC did not. And then in 2021, both of the expansion clubs, KC Current, Racing Louisville FC, did not make it in. And we know that, really, look at what the NHL was able to do with the Vegas Golden Knights, immediately making them one of the best teams in the game, very quickly winning the Stanley Cup. Teams and leagues, they really want to make sure that these expansion clubs hit the ground running, not just, hey, look, we've got professional sports now in our city. Now we're a part of this league. We're a part of this league and we're relevant. We're not just in it. We're in it to win it. So we'll see what happens with Denver joining the league for the 2026 season, along with Boston Nation FC joining the fray in the NWSL. This year will tell us a lot. 2025 will tell us a lot about whether or not the Rockies are able to bridge that gap to 2026 and make the postseason. 3 wild cards in each league, so 6 playoff clubs for 15, or rather 6 playoff spots for 15 teams. Those are pretty good numbers. 2025 will tell us a lot about whether or not the Rockies will make the playoffs before Denver's new NWSL club. You saw the thumbnail, Brendan Rodgers, before and after. Let's talk about the after. He's done with the Rocky, done being with the Rockies, was non-tendered this offseason to save the Rockies roughly $5.5 million in his final year of arbitration. He'll get a good amount less than that. I would sort of think $4.5 million might be at the high of what he could get in free agency for 1 year. They're able to save a little bit of money and go out and sign Tyro Estrada for $4 million guaranteed. They did also sign Kyle Farmer. So I think they've spent a lot of that savings already on Brendan Rodgers elsewhere. Of course, you couple that with Cal Quantrill and his $9+ million. Overall, the Rockies have saved some money by non-tendering those 2 guys. But now in the free agent market, a report coming out of Bob Nightingale from USA Today, the New York Yankees have actually spoken to Brendan Rodgers about his services. They, of course, have a second base slot open, theoretically, Gleyber Torres signing that big 1-year deal with the Detroit Tigers. But the Yankees have already spent a lot in free agency and player acquisition, the Cody Bellinger deal, Cody Bellinger trade being one of those larger moves. And Alex Bregman seems like he would be somewhat of a natural fit, whether at third base or second base. Bregman is willing to play some second base, despite the fact that he did just win the Gold Glove this past year in the American League. At third base, does have one of the weaker arms of those who play the hot corner. So a move to second base could possibly elongate his career just a little bit. A guy who did come up as a shortstop out of LSU. But the second base, third base combination for the Yankees right now is any combination of Jazz Chisholm, Osvaldo Cabrera, and then DJ LeMahieu. So you've got three guys for those two positions currently. Do you need a fourth? Is this somewhat of a Dodgers situation where they're bringing in a ton of infielders only to offload one or two of those players? We'll get to what the Dodgers did here over the weekend in just a second. But if Brendan Rodgers does go to the New York Yankees, that will be one of the more extreme makeovers that we've seen in the last few decades. Johnny Damon, of course, being the biggest makeover, getting rid of his beard and long hair from his days with the Boston Red Sox. Rodgers' hair, not quite as long. Beard, depending on, if he shaves down just a little bit, not quite as long. But that will certainly be a drastic makeover for Brendan Rodgers if he does end up signing a deal with the Yankees, where I really think he fits in better in that second base slot. I don't know how much they would use him over at third base, but again, you talk about arm strength and Bregman not being great, still winning a Gold Glove award. I think the Yankees could figure out a way to play up Rodgers and maybe get a little more versatility out of him, where he does play some third base for the Yankees going forward. I alluded to the Dodgers trade just a second ago. They deal Gavin Lux, the second baseman, to the Cincinnati Reds. Dodgers, in exchange, receive outfielder Mike Serrata, who was just a third-round pick for the Reds this past year in 2024. Dodgers also received the 37th overall pick in the 2025 MLB draft. And any other draft, pick number 37, is not so great. Although you can find a Pro Bowler in the NFL. NBA, maybe not so much. Although Nikola Jokic, he was somewhere on the 37th pick, I think. That being said, you're getting a lot of money with that pick as well. A lot of flexibility in your bonus pool. So the Dodgers doing a really nice job to get a lot out of their current situation in the infield. Apparently, Mookie Betts is going to be playing a lot of shortstop, which is not what the Dodgers said. The Dodgers said at the beginning of this offseason, Mookie Betts is going to the outfield. Period. He's going back out there. Playing second base shortstop is probably going to beat up on him a lot more than in that sweet spot in right field where he's won multiple Gold Glove awards. And yet they go out and sign Hae-Sung Kim, 3 years, $12.5 million. And then they say he's going to be a utility infielder. He's going to be a super utility guy. He did play a tiny bit of outfield in the KBO with the Kiwoom Heroes. And so the Dodgers saying, look, we're just going to have a ton of utility guys to fit in all these different slots. And really, the majority of our up-the-middle double play combination between second base and shortstop is going to be Gavin Lux and Mookie Betts. And they were not being honest about that either. And that's not a bad thing because the Dodgers simply did not show their cards. They held it close to their vest and they played it exactly right. Mookie Betts is going to the outfield. So we're looking at infielders. And what do they end up doing after saying Mookie Betts is going to the outfield? They signed Michael Conforto. They re-signed Teoscar Hernandez. Then Mookie Betts, he's now our second base shortstop. So is Gavin Lux. We're going to go ahead and say Hae-Sung Kim, he's going to the outfield. Same with Chris Taylor, all those guys. Tommy Edman, he's really going to be our center fielder more so than play shortstop. So those are our guys at second and shortstop. Oops, look at that. We've now turned around and we've traded Gavin Lux because Hae-Sung Kim all along was probably in the cards to be the Dodgers' second baseman on opening day in Japan. Don't forget, Cubs-Dodgers open the season about a week plus early before the rest of MLB on March 27th. Forget what the date is. Is it March 15th, 17th, 19th? I feel like it's an odd number. But the Dodgers do start over in Tokyo, Japan. And again, they play it right. They utilize their assets. They need outfielders, so they try to shove as many outfielders out there as possible to make the market a little bit better. And the agents and the players saying, well, we think you have a hole out there. We need to go. You need us. You need our services. So maybe you need to pay like $1 million or $2 million more, right? No, we don't, because we got Mookie Betts in the outfield. Turns out that was not the plan all along. Just like Gavin Lux was not really a part of the plan at second base. Now, do I think that this is going exactly how the Dodgers planned it? Absolutely not. I think the Dodgers, they get all of their assets together in one pile and figure out how they can manage it as best as possible. And in this instance, acquiring Hai-Sung Kim, 3 years, 12 and a half guaranteed, 2 more club options, escalators to bring it up to $22 million. That allowed them to go out, acquire him at the right price. If the price wasn't right, guess what? Gavin Lux is your second baseman. But the price was right. So now you can turn around and trade Gavin Lux and bring in 2 top prospects right away. One, a guy who just got drafted last year, outfielder Mike Serrata, who's yet to play a single game as a professional. So he will make his debut. He will say, hey, I was drafted by the Reds, but you wouldn't know that. There's no trace of me being on the Reds at all, because I didn't play a game for them. And then they get a pick right after the first round, pick number 37. Where are the Reds going to utilize Gavin Lux? It's not really clear right now. Matt McClain, he's expected back at second base, did have left shoulder surgery, missed all of 2024, but go back and look what his numbers were in 2023. Probably should have placed a little bit higher than 5th place in the National League Rookie of the Year award voting. I think if voters maybe would have taken a little bit more time, maybe if the voting had been 5 deep, as it will be now going forward. One of the bigger pieces of news coming out of our BBWAA meeting in December in Dallas was that 5 votes for Rookie of the Year. So maybe I've said it before, from the people that I've talked to that voted on the Rookie of the Year in 2023, had the ballot been 5 deep, Nolan Jones, you would have seen get a few more 3rd place votes. You would have seen him get 4th place votes, and you would have seen James Outman slide back to 4th and 5th. You very well could have had Jones 3rd, Matt McClain 4th, and then James Outman finishing 5th. But McClain is definitely a player to watch for the Reds at second base. Heimer Candelario, who they just signed last offseason, pencil him in as your 3rd baseman. Maybe you prefer him more over at first base, but that's where Christian Encarnacio Strand is located. Ellie De La Cruz is at shortstop. End of that discussion. But that doesn't even include Noel V. Marte, who can play second, short, and 3rd base. So if you go over to roster resource, you're actually going to find out that Gavin Lux is now the Reds DH. Not bad. The left-handed bat that crushes righties. So Terry Francona is going to have his choice. He has a lot of options. I said it before. The Reds acquiring Terry Francona told you everything you need to know about them meaning business for 2025 and the next couple of years. They're trading away their 3rd round pick and then essentially a back of the 1st round draft pick to get 2 years of Gavin Lux. It's only 2 years, believe it or not. Gavin Lux, I don't know if you feel like he's been around for a while or you've been waiting for him to develop. He's been developing. I think for some Dodgers fans and some people that don't pay a ton of attention to the Dodgers, and I think even if you do pay a ton of attention to the Dodgers, Gavin Lux is like, what, the 15th most important guy on that roster. You would have not realized that he hasn't been the disappointment I think some folks out there might say, right? He couldn't handle shortstop. Maybe he didn't live up to the hype, but this was a guy that did have big shoes to fill. First, Corey Seager. All right, that didn't work out. They acquired Trey Turner. And then when Trey Turner left, it was supposed to be all about Gavin Lux. He missed all of 2023 with a torn ACL in his right knee. That really set him back. But if you look back at the last 4 seasons, 3 of which he was active, he's essentially been a 3-win player when you factor out his trips to the injured list. That's the kind of player that the Cincinnati Reds are getting for the next 2 years. And again, he's still in his peak at 27 years old right now. This is a guy that his last at-bat for the Dodgers was a good one. Game-tying RBI in Game 5 of the World Series in New York. That's a valuable player to have. And that's why the Reds are willing to fork over such prospect capital for 2 years of Gavin Lux. They did a really nice job for that. especially when you consider Hai-Sung Kim probably going to make about the same amount as Gavin Lux is going to this year and next overall. But now you've got Kim for one extra year, and now you've got the draft picks. So you essentially swapped Gavin Lux for Hai-Sung Kim, a third-round pick from last year, outfielder Mike Serrata, and the 37th overall pick in 2025. That's asset management. And I know Rockies fans out there, many of which have reached out to me and said, oh, man, it seems like Gavin Lux and Brendan Rodgers, we're going to have like the same path, the same general trajectory to having an outstanding big league career. And I think both of them are still trying to establish themselves in many ways. But the big what if is what could have happened and what would have happened had the Rockies moved on Brendan Rodgers when he was more at his peak in a similar way to Gavin Lux. I think in a lot of different schools of thought and a lot of different circles, when players are prospects, they arguably have their most value. So Brendan Rodgers being a top 20 prospect, Gavin Lux right around there as well. Oh man, those guys have peak value. You don't really see a ton of trades of a superstar for a guy who's in the minors that's like a can't miss prospect. Those kind of deals don't really go down. So you're going to have to include a bunch of stuff anyway. So you could argue, sure, when they were prospects and the bloom was still on the rose and we didn't know certain things about them and the sky is the limit, you can argue that's when a player's value can be its most. But as big of a prospect as Mike Trout was, obviously once he became a perennial MVP candidate, he had way more value than when he was a prospect. So it's not true in every instance. And so if Lux and Rodgers had met that potential, you'd have looked back and said, wow, that's a good thing you didn't make that trade while this player was a prospect. In the case of Rodgers and the Rockies, that big what if is, what if the Rockies had dealt Brendan Rodgers when he was a prospect and was not penciled in as the replacement for DJ LeMahieu, and you would have included him in a deal to the Marlins for JT Realmuto, and you would have had Realmuto for 2 seasons with that group. That would have included Ryan McMahon at first base. You can re-sign LeMahieu now at second, Story at short, third base, Nolan Arenado. That's a big what if. That didn't happen. You could also look at after the 2022 season when he was a Gold Glove Award winner at second base and was worth over 4 wins above replacement. A lot of that coming on defense. And he was 3 years away from free agency as opposed to 2. So I think the package for Lux probably would still have been more than what the Rockies would have received. But again, that goes back to the Dodgers managing their assets. And it's a little column A, column B where, they're not putting all their eggs in the same basket. They're saying, well, you know what? We've got ourselves a lot of infield depth right now. So we can take some of those eggs and swap them out for some future assets because we've got enough right now. Are the Dodgers better with Hai-Sung Kim and Gavin Lux? Yeah, of course. Again, you gotta manage the roster just a little bit. Who's the last guy coming off the 26-man roster? Is it that much more of an improvement? But in general, in a vacuum, having both Hai-Sung Kim and Gavin Lux makes the Dodgers better than having only one of them. That being said, you can keep one of them, get rid of the other, and now your future is that much brighter. And that's why the Dodgers are the best at what they do. After 2022, remember, the Rockies had an average loss total of 91 games from 2019 to 2022. So I'm extrapolating 2020. That was only 60 games. So they had lost 91 games on average. Was keeping Brendan Rodgers that critical? Was it that important? Could they have gone from being a 71-win team perennially to an 85-win team and maybe sneaking in as the final wild card? Could they have really improved by 14 games like that? I don't know that that's realistic for that to have happened in one season from 2022 to 2023. Rodgers, another injury with the shoulder, and misses a majority of 2023 before a solid 2024 where he gets non-tendered. But it's that post-2022 season that makes you say, what if? Again, I don't think that necessarily would have changed the Rockies' prospects going forward in the figurative sense. Does that make them that much closer to a contender in 2026? Not really, because again, maybe you're only bringing back one prospect of note, but you are one prospect closer to bridging that gap to the postseason. And that's one of the things that Colorado has to learn from, right? You need depth for the rebuild, but you also have to be able to evaluate effectively, and you have to trade from your depth. And the Rockies right now have more depth than they have in the past. Now, it's not a depth of big league talent. A lot of it is beneath the surface in the minors, but balancing that depth and evaluating effectively and taking a little bit of a chance, going prospect for prospect. We got a lot of outfielders right now. They can say to themselves, let's trade it for a Dominican Summer League prospect that's not going to be ready for another 4 or 5 years. Because the next 2 to 3, well, we only have 3 spots in the outfield. We got Brendan Doyle out there. We got Nolan Jones ready to come back. Jordan Beck looks like he's pretty solid. Is there room for Yanquiel Fernandez and Zach Veen and Benny Montgomery and Sterling Thompson? And Robert Kalash is going to be making some noise here pretty soon too. We don't have enough room for these guys. So can you trade a prospect for an even younger prospect that can then help you and you can have them on the field for 2028, 29? You can. You can also acquire some money in the international bonus pool and go after Roki Sasaki. That's also how you can use that depth. So the Rockies, look, they've got an opportunity here, especially they've got an opportunity to learn from other teams what they're able to do to be successful and take some chances. And I think the Rockies have still taken some chances over the last couple of years. They're just not big leaps of faith. They're not major chances. And they haven't been chances significant enough to turn that roster around and to make them a club that is at the end of their rebuild and that is very close to getting to the postseason. The Rockies Insider here with me, Patrick Lyons, talking about the Colorado Rockies, talking about the NL West, talking about so much of what's going on in baseball. It's the hot stove season. We got the snow, and so now there's a lot of traction gaining in the winter here, and you might have traction out on the ice. Make sure you're careful on the road out there. But we've got some things still happening about a month away from pitchers and catchers reporting. And one of the things that ended up breaking down on Tuesday, or ended up happening in a positive way for many of you Rockies fans out there, is tickets went on sale for Rockies Fest. That's right. If you're not a season ticket holder, it is $7. That gets you in the door for the event on January 25th. And it's the typical good time at Coors Field, getting back to the ballpark. That in and of itself is wonderful. For $7, just being able to roam around Coors Field, like that in and of itself is a lot of fun. They've got so many different events going on. It's a great way to really get you through what's probably going to be another cold winter day. But there are a lot of really cool events and stuff going on. You can get some admission. You can get some autograph tickets as well that allow you to get autographs from players. About 31. I did some quick counting. 31 of the 40-man roster is going to be there. So ton of guys. I didn't see Kyle Freeland's name on that list. Kyle Freeland not on that list. Ryan McMahon is. The usual suspects are on the list. Gomber's going to be there. You can see Sam Hilliard, Nolan Jones, Jordan Beck, Brenton Doyle, in fact, will be there. Ezekiel Tovar, Michael Tolia. You can see all of those guys and a couple of the prospects too. Chase Dollander is going to be there again. Yanquiel Fernandez, Kyle Karros, Northwest League MVP, Benny Montgomery, Zach Veen. They also have some alumni that are going to be in the house as well. That's pretty cool. So they've got autograph sessions set up, Q&A, you ask some questions, you get some answers from players, from some coaches, some of the behind-the-scenes personnel. They're going to do the Rockies Family Feud again, which is always fun. There is going to be a garage sale over at McGregor Square. That's where they had it last year. They probably still have some items from 2021's All-Star Game that are pretty neat. They even have a lot of the cardboard cutouts of players from the pandemic season. It's going to be 5 years ago coming up. Crazy. But a lot of those cutouts from some of the lesser known players, you can probably get a Johan Flande cutout still, but they got some cool stuff, game used memorabilia, items from the clubhouse that players didn't use or they were just extras. There's a self-guided tour you can check out, tons of kids activities, and new for this year, they got a baseball card show, believe it or not, a silent auction with exclusive items, Rockies authentic items for sale. That's going to be over at Milepost Zero at McGregor Square. So check that one out. That one's going to be really, really neat. Garage sale opens for plan holders with Rockies Fest tickets at 8:30. Rest of the public at 10 a.m. Go in there and grab some really cool souvenirs. But the alumni that's going to be there, it's got to get you pretty excited. Are they going to be signing? I don't know. But the alumni, starting from Yorvi Torrealba, a 2007 Rocktober Rockies hero, he will be there. Clint Hurdle is going to be there. And as if he has never left, Charlie Blackmon will indeed be at Rockies Fest. Make sure you check that out. Justin Verlander is going to be at Coors Field a lot more this year. The future Hall of Famer, future first ballot Hall of Famer, has 3 starts at Coors Field with a solid 3.5 ERA in 3 starts. His first 2 are a lot better than his last one in 2023. I actually wrote about Justin Verlander coming to Colorado to be with the Rockies in my most recent Rockies newsletter. Not as any kind of reasonable or feasible signing, but one in which was a fantasy booking. Why would he possibly ever want to come to Colorado? Well, I had a couple reasons of why something crazy like that could happen. The Ian Desmond signing seemed crazy at the time. Chris Bryant signing seemed crazy. I think you could probably even put Nolan Arenado extension on that list for how much it actually was, setting a franchise record. So the Rockies have a tendency to make these surprise signings. That's one of the topics I wrote about in this most recent Rockies newsletter. Check that out over on Substack. Just search my name, Patrick D. Lyons, Substack, and you should be able to find it with relative ease. But Verlander signs a $12.5 million. I think that's the number. $12.5 million to join the San Francisco Giants. That's right. He's going to be pitching in a rather pitcher-friendly ballpark over there at Oracle Field. So that's a big one right there for him to be able to do that. Actually, $15 million is his 1-year deal to throw his age 42 season. Didn't pitch a ton last year. Was with the Houston Astros. You may have forgotten after a very brief stint with the Mets. Was able to go 17 starts, 90 innings pitched. Not great, but was able to help lead the Astros back to the postseason. And look, Verlander only further improves that Giants rotation, which I already talked about this offseason, how good it is and how the Giants can very well be a sleeper in the NL West and possibly even jump ahead of the Diamondbacks, jump ahead of the San Diego Padres as the second best team in the National League West. And now with the addition of Justin Verlander, we don't know what you're going to get from him, but that, at least on paper, makes the Giants that much better. Justin Verlander, Logan Webb, Robbie Ray. How about that for a 1-2-3? You also have Jordan Hicks and a young 23-year-old Kyle Harrison. Tristan Beck is dangling around the rotation. They've got a lot of options. Hayden Birdsong, who debuted last year, has a lot of upside. Same thing with Landon Raup. So the Giants making some big moves. Frugal almost, $15 million. Not major. Second biggest signing you'd have to think for this club since that big Willy Adames deal for him to become their shortstop. Texting with some of the baseball boys that I'm friends with. Kenneth Weber will give him a shout out from Purple Row and the brand new Best of the West show over on the Blake Street Banner channel. Numbers have been really good for that show. Quality, the show itself has been really good as well. But K-Dub pointing out that, hey, you know what? Randy Johnson, he got his 300th win with the Giants. Can Verlander do that? Well, right now Verlander's at 262 career wins. So he's going to need at least 3 more seasons to do that. But what's interesting is After his age 41 season, as I said, Verlander has 262 wins. How many wins did Randy Johnson have after his age 41 season? 263. And he was still able to get to that 300 win mark. 303 is where he finished out. So Verlander, look, despite the fact that he's made over $400 million in his career, dude still wants to play and still wants to win a ring. Gotta love that. Texas Rangers signed former Rocky Chris Martin to a 1-year, $5.5 million deal. You may have forgotten Chris Martin debuted with the Rockies back in 2014 after going out on the independent circuit, had to play in Asia for a while before coming back to the States and having a lot more success over the last 5 years since 2020. Dude's got a 2.66 ERA, and that is in his age 34 to 38 seasons. He's aged quite nicely. Rob Bradford did say on Twitter that Chris Martin did turn down more money from the Boston Red Sox to return there. Instead, he takes a little bit less, but does get to stay at home, sleep in his own bed, as the Arlington native is going to play for the team there in Arlington. How about the Athletics, a.k.a. the A's, a.k.a. that's it. Those are the only two names you can call them. A's, Athletics. That's it. They continue to spend money. They extend Brent Rooker on a 5-year, $60 million deal that covers his first 3 years of arbitration, plus 2 more years in free agency. It's their first 5-year deal in over a decade. Do you remember who that was? I didn't. When I read it, I go, oh yeah, I remember that deal. But 10 years, 2011 was the last time the A's locked a player up to 5 or more years, and it also was an extension. Trevor Cahill, you remember him? The somewhat lumbering right-handed starting pitcher. And if you're not hip to Brent Rooker, dude's been one of the more underrated players in the game. Despite having already been an all-star, despite finishing 10th in the American League in MVP award voting, but he's had an interesting trajectory to stardom, relative stardom. If you're with the A's and they're finishing in last place every year, it's hard to get some stardom there. But we know the A's have had some good years, and maybe they are about to get a little bit better with some of the moves that they've been able to make this offseason. But Brent Rooker, first-round pick back in 2017 with Minnesota. After a few years, he was traded to the Padres in 2022, only lasted about 4 months before he was dealt to the Kansas City Royals right before that deadline, or on deadline day in 2022, was waived by Kansas City that November in the offseason. So 2 trades and placed on waivers within 7 months, latches on with then the Oakland A's and immediately takes off. All-star in 2023 with 30 home runs. He had 39 home runs this past season with 112 RBI. Was a Silver Slugger at DH for the American League. And on my ballot, I was asked to also vote for the Edgar Martinez Most Outstanding DH Award. Honored to do that. It was a no-brainer. Number 1 was Shohei Ohtani. But on this very short, very brief 2-person ballot, my number 2 choice was either going to be between Brent Rooker and Marcell Ozuna. And Ozuna finished higher in the National League in the MVP award voting, and I think he was a lot more valuable to Atlanta than anybody on a last-place team or a team finishing in the bottom of the standings in the American League like a Brent Rooker. But if we're just talking about most outstanding DH, what did you do on the field, at the plate? It was Brent Rooker. Both versions of WAR, Baseball Reference and Fangraphs, 5.6 versus 4.3 in terms of B-WAR. 5.1 versus 4.7, a little closer, but it still favored Brent Rooker over Marcell Ozuna in F-WAR. And so for me, Brent Rooker did get my second-place vote in the Edgar Martinez Most Outstanding DH Award voting. And the A's, Ken Rosenthal and Evan Drellick have been writing about this a little bit for The Athletic, the fact that the A's have needed to spend. Teams have to spend the money that they've earned, quote unquote, through revenue sharing and the on-field product. You have to spend that. And so after this extension for Brent Rooker, A's now at about $97 million. They're probably going to have to push that to 105 in order to avoid a grievance from the Players Association. As far as the Marlins go, I don't know what they're doing because they're not spending any money whatsoever. They're one of a few teams that has not signed a big league player right now, I believe. So they've got to figure out a couple things, to say the least. Some musings that I've had looking at the NL West roster. Really looking forward to my next invitation over to that Best of the West show. Really glad to help them get launched. But when you think about things in terms of the National League West, it gives you a lot to chew on. There's a lot of meat on that bone looking at the division. And Jordan Montgomery is a player that Arizona would love to deal. And when you look for a match for him, there's a lot of teams that could use some starting pitching depth, even at the price that he is currently making. And Arizona may have to pay down some of his deal rather than use him as a long reliever. But it got me thinking that Arizona would love to get rid of this guy to save a little bit of money. The Yankees right now are having the same conversations, trying to get Marcus Stroman's money off the book. And I've long thought that one of the markets that the Rockies can operate in is give me your players that you want to get rid of that's making too much money. Because if you pay down some of that contract and you float a couple prospects our way, we will gladly take that player off your hands, especially if it's a really good fit. If you're talking about a Stroman or a Montgomery, are those two, anywhere from number 1 to number 3 starter? Yeah, again, depending on the season. They've all been able to do that. So to get a player when his value is down and you're going to get some prospects on top of it, that's a trade you should look into. So Jordan Montgomery fitting into the Rockies, I think that would make sense. Now, the Rockies do have a lot of depth right now in their rotation. Got an article coming out very soon on Just Baseball about that. But it would make sense. He's making $22.5 million in 2025. And right now, the Rockies are currently spending $22 million on Marquez and Senzatella combined. So it got me thinking, are the Rockies more likely to get 30 starts from Jordan Montgomery or 30 starts from Marquez and Senzatella combined? Now, you can't trade Marquez and Senzatella to go ahead and free up some money on your payroll. Right now, unfortunately, they are damaged goods. They're going to have to reclaim some of that value on the field after coming back from Tommy John surgery. There's still relative unknowns in that way. But these are the kind of moves that the Rockies can take advantage of and operate by saying, like, we'll help you out. You've got a problem. We can be your solution, but we're not just going to help you. And we're not just going to be happy to get this player whose value is maybe at an all-time low. You also got to give us something. And we've seen teams have to hold on to players that other clubs do not want. So you hold on to that guy and now you got to pay him. But if you're able to give up a little bit of the prospect capital, you can free up that spot on your roster. And the Rockies will take that player and that prospect and make their team that much more better as well. Right now, Jack Flaherty's market is starting to heat up. Blue Jays, Tigers, Cubs, Giants were reportedly in on him. Now you got to think that's not going to happen after the signing of Justin Verlander. JP Morosi has said that the Orioles are open to a reunion with Jack Flaherty. That could possibly work. Now, after signing Charlie Morton, their rotation is looking pretty deep, pretty bloated. And, Flaherty was able to show ace caliber stuff during parts of 2024, but are the Orioles going to go out and pay him that money? He's a fit, at least from the perspective that you don't have to give up a qualifying offer to sign Jack Flaherty because he was traded during the season. If you get traded during the year, or if you've already received a qualifying offer, you are ineligible to get one going forward. Boston is considering a 6-man rotation, reportedly. Not a bad idea when you've got some arms that you want to protect, like Garrett Crochet, who you just acquired, like Lucas Giolito coming back from Tommy John surgery at some point during the year. Could we see the Rockies consider some kind of 6-man rotation when you consider the fact that Marquez and Senzatella, they're also both coming back from Tommy John surgery? They should be ready for opening day, but you want to limit their innings just a little bit? That's one way that you can do that with a pseudo 6-man rotation. You're probably going to have guys take the ball every 5 days, But once in a while, maybe you give them an extra day off, or you skip a guy in the rotation once. That's going to keep everybody healthy that much longer. And that could also allow you to learn about the positives and the benefits of a 6-man rotation going forward. Is this how we get the best out of all of our players? Is by having some scheduled IL stints for some of our guys to keep them fresher later on in the season? What would that do for our club? Can we experiment that way? That is one of the strategies that the Rockies can benefit from trying to utilize this year during this rebuild. And for all of the Rockies fans out there, hey, look, if you're banging the table and saying the Rockies used to once had a 6-man rotation, I'm not upset at you for being upset at me because you thought that I forgot. I didn't. That wasn't really a 6-man rotation. That was a piggyback situation going on, right? That was all right, this guy's going to go 3, this guy's going to go 3, and neither were really starters, right? That was a concept where you use 6 starting pitchers. No, this is slightly different. This is definitely a model that we're starting to see teams utilize a lot more. This type of quote unquote 6-man rotation. Again, I am mad at you if you were mad at me because you thought I forgot. I'm proud of you for remembering that. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. So that's it's going to be an interesting story going down to spring training to see if that's something that the Rockies end up tapping into. If so, they might need to bring in another non-roster invite, a more veteran guy for them. Look, they've got plenty of young pitching, but I think a lot of them we might not see until the second half of the year. And even if you break camp with Chase Dollander, which there's a chance he's on that opening day roster, you still are going to want to protect him just a little bit. So that's going to be one of the first questions I'm going to ask Bud Black when we get down to spring training in Scottsdale in about a month's time. Nolan Arenado's market is heating up. Maybe by the time you listen to this, it will have finalized. Boston Red Sox are that team that, once again, reports coming out, Arenado is willing to lift his no trade clause and say, no, you know what, I'll go ahead and accept a deal to the East Coast. Not played on the East Coast just yet. Only had spring training on the East Coast even a couple years with St. Louis. So with Boston balking at the price tag on Alex Bregman, reaching about $200 million, they're going to look to make a few more frugal moves. And again, going back to what I had previously said about Bregman moving over to second base, that doesn't help your third base situation with Rafael Devers. If you want him to move over to first base, you need a third baseman. And I think Nolan Arenado could be that perfect fit, especially when you consider he'd be reuniting with Trevor Story. I think that one would work out incredibly well. Thank you so much for joining me. Right now, if you're watching this, go over to the Blake Street Banner channel on YouTube. They've got a show going on right now. Go listen to that. Go support them. They're great baseball people. You're great baseball people. You support me here on the channel, on the podcast, on social medias, at Patrick D. Lyons. I need that support. I do. And you give it to me, and I appreciate that. And that's why I want to give you the best possible show each and every day. So despite the momentum we've built up here together, as I like to say, that momentum, it's only as good as my next show. So, of course, I'll talk to you then.